Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm Érica. I'm from the research group Por Falar em Tradução, who is organizing this table. And I would like to give a very special thanks for FAEPEX, PPGLA, the group, and PAGU. And today we are going to have the round table, and my colleague Ana Bentes is going to mediating. After this, we're going to have coffee, and then we come here again for the students' presentations. Okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank the research group and Por Falar em Tradução, and it's translating and speak of translation, right? And I would like to thank the group and Professor Érica Lima for inviting me to mediate this roundtable. Okay, thank you. I would like to say a little thing about the group. The group's name is inspired by the verse of Onde Anda Você? You remember this music? You young guys don't know, but we know. A song by the poet Vinícius de Moraes and the guitarist Hermano Silva. It was thus through sung words, and the first meeting was born. And speaking of longing, Saudade, right, became and speaking of translation. E por falar em saudade, then the name of the group, e por falar em tradução, right? And speaking, over the years, they formed the research group, and it was half by chance, half as a pretext to talk about translation, half because the word longing, saudade, is always so untranslated. So I'm going to present my colleagues here and we are very, very delighted to receive Janny Wong, and she is an assistant professor in Chinese interpreting in the Department of Modern Language at the University of Birmingham. Prior to joining the University of Birmingham, she taught translation at Hang Seng University of Hong Kong, Beijing. Is that all right? Yeah. Normal University, Baptist University of Hong Kong, right? United International College, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong, amongst others. She's a very published translator. She has translated 10 books on religion, health, and finance. My her current research focuses on translatability of religious dimensions in English literature, including Shakespeare, right? Anna Schäffer. She has undergraduate in modern languages at the Universidade of Vale do Rio dos Sinos, Unicinos, right? A long-term translation specialization from the University of São Paulo, a master's in applied linguistics at Unicamp, a PhD in translation studies also at Unicamp, a postdoc at the University of Campinas also. She's associate professor and graduate and undergraduate programs. She was education, master's degree, mother language and translation in interpreting department at the Seventh-day Adventist University of São Paulo from 1994 to 2021, right?
Yes.
You have stopped there,
no,
right?
I'm retired.
You're retired.
Trying to be retired. Trying yet. I'm not completely retired.
And Quéfren,
I will.
Quéfren de Moura holds a PhD in foreign language and translation from the School of Philosophy, Language and Human Sciences at the University of São Paulo. Her research is supervised by Dr. John Milton, focused on the representation of the feminine in the Hebrew Bible, especially in prophecy and poetry. addressing issues of translation and its influence on the interpretation of sacred texts. She currently works at the Bible Society of Brazil as a translation manager and consultant, and is the coordinator of translation projects for Latin America and the Caribbean at the United Bible Societies. Is that okay? So her work involves multimodal translation, collaboration with teams dedicated to translating the Bible into several languages, including Brazilian Sign Language, Libras, and Portuguese Sign Language, LGP, as well as indigenous languages such as Kaigang and immigrant languages such as Pomerania. Right, Quéfren? Yeah. So I'm delighted and very happy to be here with my colleagues, and now I am going to pass the word to Janny. Thank you, Janny.
Thank you. I'm really humbled by such a big group today, because when me and Érica met yesterday, we weren't sure how many are coming. If it's just a few, I will still be glad. And I remember just about 10 minutes before the official start, we already got a few people. So I'm already quite satisfied. And now we have quite a big group. So this time round is actually my 4th time in Brazil. My first time actually took place in 2015, 10 years ago. So it's my 10th anniversary of coming to Brazil. And if it is to Unicamp, this is my 2nd time. So I do recognize some of the familiar faces at the back here, because last December we were here also listening to some of the student presentations. And it seems to me most of you are quite local here. And I see is it a Chinese face here? No. Japanese? Okay, nice meeting you here. So we have an Asian face here. I will quote quite a lot of examples from the Chinese Bible, but I will back translate them into English so that everyone understands what I'm presenting. So the title of today is about the significance of women's involvement in the retranslating of the Chinese Bible. As I am doing this presentation, I'm quite happy to know that like Anna has read the work in text already. So actually what I'm going to present, other than the paper, rather than just reading out from the text, which may be quite boring, I want to add a little bit of footnote. And I think a lot of people are interested what inspired, for example, a feminist theologian, how they came into being. So there is a little bit of history, personal history, family background that I would like to share. Because when I started the study of feminist theology back in 2007, so it's been a long time, 18 years ago. That's the time when I first studied for my master's degree in Christian studies with a specialization in biblical studies. So during the time, I was taught by a very well-known feminist theologian who opened up our horizon. And so during that time, I already have finished part of the paper that I'm presenting today. But that was the first encounter with feminist theology. And later I was also invited to write a book chapter on some feminist theologians that are actually from Latin America. So that's why I initiated this project with Érica, because I know this is the place where liberation theology, feminist movement are actually originated. And I have been writing at that time on Elsa Temes, which is feminist theologian from Latin America. And I've been very impressed with a lot of the stories that shaped a feminist theologian. Now, talk about feminist theologian, as much as I finished my theology degree, first in Hong Kong and then in Glasgow, which is my PhD in literature and theology, I have to confess that I am not a full-on feminist. So maybe that surprised some of you, or maybe that disappoints some of you. Because how can you not be a full-on feminist if you are to study feminism or feminist translation? Well, I think that also relates how I interpret the scriptures, especially on those gendered-related scriptures via different denominations. So I went through different denominations and have been influenced by the very different theologies behind, and gradually I find my way out. Okay, so because when in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, when God made men and women in His image, and also in another scripture that talks about God made creatures according to His kind, and God allowed the very different structures that exist in men and women, not just physical but emotionally. So when that is the case, that is how I interpret. There are still some things that I will leave for guys to do. Okay, so I'm not full-on feminist. I still train up people from my church, the young boys from my church, that you have to take heavy objects to help women to take some of the heavy objects, heavy bags, for example. So I do train them to help, because physically they are stronger. There are physical differences. And I still believe that there are things that guys should take the initiative. I won't take the initiative. I won't take the job of guys in some aspects in terms of relationship as well. So I'm not full-on feminist. But on the other hand, I would like to show some of the pictures. I think this is the interesting part. So you will recognize me, who in the middle between my mama and my papa. That was also, wow, it's been over 20 years ago at the graduation ceremony of my undergraduate degree. So at that time, you can still see that although my dad is already in his early 60s upon retirement, my mom also of similar age, but they still show as quite good looking. So when they were much younger, they are even more good looking. And I would like to tell you that the person who inspired me most to embark on this journey is actually my mother. Okay. So to cut the long story short, my mother is a full-time housewife, which is quite typical in those days in a Chinese society, where under the Confucian's philosophy that women have to follow men, that is the wife has to follow husband, and then when she grow old, then the woman has to follow the son. So there are a few follows, we call the three follows that a woman should do in order to classify as a virtuous woman. So if you don't submit to husband, if you don't follow as such, then actually you are not considered virtuous according to the Confucius philosophy. So my mother is a staunch supporter of in this front. She was a medical student. She graduated with a medical degree. So actually, in terms of education, she is more educated than my dad. My dad graduated with a railway degree in Beijing at the university. So at that time, having a university degree is still quite something. But then my dad is also proud of being able to marry a woman who had a medical degree. But my mom never worked. As a medical doctor, she never worked. So, and that is the thing that she regretted for the rest of her life. And so to cut the long story short, for the right after graduation, because of the situation in Chinese politics, because of the Cultural Revolution, so she heard that if you don't work, then you may have a higher chance of being approved to leave China to go to Hong Kong. So for 10 years, she just did not work for the sake of the good of the family, so that the whole family can move to Hong Kong under the communist rule. So she just decided that she continued to be a housewife until one day the papers came through that she was the whole family was approved to come to Hong Kong when my father was already in Hong Kong, about to receive the whole family. But then you may say that then after going to Hong Kong, actually she can still work. But at that time, my father already has a full-time job. He's quite, he worked with different well-known consultancy firms, which are British and under the pay of the Hong Kong government. So he has a full-time job, and he said that if you take on those kind of jobs, such as nurse or such as working in a clinic, which she's overqualified to do, then who is to take care of the children? Who is to cook for me? Who is to do the house chores? So you shouldn't work. And my mom, being a follower, a staunch supporter, as I said, of Confucius ideology, and okay, then just be the housewife. As a housewife, there are lots of house chores to do, and while she sacrificed a lot, in the end, or in return, the kind of comments that she received by my dad at the height of his anger was that, look at you, I think it's better I think I have caught myself a mouse in the house that actually eats up everything in the house. So my mom has been suffering a lot of these kinds of anger, because when it is only one person who works in the household, the finances are not great. So she has just to bear all these to herself. So when I asked her, when I was very young, I already asked her, have you ever considered actually separation? Why do you have to suffer like this? And she said, well, but then I have to protect your interests. And I know deep down, what was underlying is that she had no choice, because she was not able to work for so many years. So how can she support herself? So as a result, in her conclusion, when I was studying at the university, before I get into any kind of relationship, she gave me a warning. And that shaped the kind of motivation why I am doing this kind of research. So as a conclusion, she said, not being able to work was the greatest regret in my life. And I don't want you to follow in my footsteps. So remember, as a lady, always maintain financial independence or financial freedom. So these are the words that I truly take heart. And now I am in my 40s, and whatever happens, I still remember the importance of having our own identity, achieving our dream. That is very important. And my dream, actually, part of my dream actually is to travel around the world in order to share or teach something of good cause. And that explained why I'm here today. So the next photo, actually, to the left side, that is the marriage certificate. So they are still. I will move from here. So they are still married. They are living together here in Birmingham. They are about to celebrate the 61st wedding anniversary this year. So to the sacrifice of a lot of things as well. So this is the last picture I'm showing you. I am the one in the second row to the left. So I'm the leftmost person in the second row. If you can find me with glasses, This actually is Catholic missionary school called Marymount. I was there from primary to secondary school for 13 years. Why I particularly show this picture, which is also a part of the motivation for today, is because this is a girls' school that is well known for training up future female leaders. And there was a saying that if girls, well, at least in our culture, if girls are allocated to mixed co-ed schools, that is boys and girls school, which are also quite common in our culture, usually the leader roles will be relegated to the boys. However, because it's a girls' school, then actually female students also can take part in leadership roles. So when I was at my secondary school, I also took part in different kinds of club activities, which are also, I was the chair of a few club activities, editorial board. So I started to learn to be a leader since young, and I think all this also is thanks to the secondary education that we had. So for this paper, because a lot actually has been published, and actually it is available online. So I will highlight certain things, and when you are interested, you can always go back to those examples in the text. So I myself, being from Hong Kong is a very special place. We are under Confucius influence, but the influence is not as much as in mainland China, because on the other hand, we are also under 150 years of colonial rule of the British government. So that's why we had the opportunity to be sent to these kind of missionary schools, educated with a different set of ethos, okay, quite different from the communist ideology, quite different from the Confucius ideology. So Hong Kong has been a place that nurtured a lot of female leaders. But still, despite Hong Kong being known for all these, we can see a big difference between the secular world and the Christian community. So in the secular world, we can see that female leadership actually rose to 35% in 2019, just a few years ago. But when you compare this with the Christian community, it is only, according to last year's statistics, still it is only 24% of women who can take up leadership roles in the church. Okay, so in terms of the church, we are still lagging behind. And I myself, I'm also, other than being an academic, I'm speaking also in the capacity of being a church pastor in the UK. I'm also ordained. But the ordination process is also, I would say that even while we are being ordained as an official minister, it doesn't mean that we enjoy the kind of authority as an ordained minister. Okay, so ordained is one thing, but whether people recognize you is another thing. So there is a common saying that if you're ordained, being an ordained female minister, is the authority that you get is not even as authoritative as a pastor's wife. So this is still happening in the Chinese society, and then so that's give you the scenario of what has been at this stage. So what are the obstacles? What stopped women from taking leadership roles? So well, there is a report by Hong Kong Women Christian Council, and according to the report, there are 4 points. But I'm going to add to the to make it a 5th point. So, so for the 4 points that is quite familiar to a lot of people already, because Hong Kong is still part of China, which is still in a male-dominated society, patriarchal structure, and according to the Confucius mode of thinking, still having boys in the family are still worth much more than having girls. So still a lot of families attach more importance to boys than to girls. And then also is the fact that there is a lack of system to put in place in approving women's ordination. And there is also the fact that some churches, they base their decision on the actual needs and the nature of ministry. Because there are not many schools or seminaries that touch on feminist theology, and as a result, female theology students, after going through the theological training, they may still feel that they are not as competent. Okay, and this is still existing, and according to the fourth point, that women also have to take into consideration a lot of factors. And for example, when you have children, then how are you going to balance church life, family life, and other kinds of and other roles? But the fifth point that I would like to add is about the interpretation of scriptures, and I'm going to throw some of the lines to you to see if you also are thinking like some of the Chinese audience are thinking. There are three particular gender-related scriptures that actually are seen as suppressive to women's authority or women's leadership. So in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 3 to 16, what husband is to the bride, Christ is to the church. And if a woman is to take up the leadership in a church, that means she is taking up the role of husband and father in the family, and that is quite controversial in the church, because they always think that it's the man who assumed the spiritual authority, and then according to Paul's teaching, Paul the Apostle's teaching in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 34 to 36, one of the lines say women should remain silent in churches. And a lot of the times, the pastors who decide on who to ordain in the denomination, they take this scripture out of context rather than instead of looking at the context, thinking that it is because at that time women are less educated, and it is because at that time there are a lot of false prophets that were female. So based on that context, Paul particularly asked the woman to shut up, to remain silent. But now things have progressed. Women sometimes are more educated than men. So that same line cannot be applied across the board blindly. And for the third one, Paul, in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 8 to 15, one of the lines say, "For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not the one being deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner." So based on what Paul interpreted the creation order, which is man first, woman second, then he analyzed this as woman being inferior because woman is the second. And also, woman was the one being deceived by the serpent who asked the woman to take the forbidden fruit. That caused the sin that led them to the downfall. So all this, in the end, is based on Paul's allegorical interpretation. So different writers in the Bible they write in different styles with their own theology in mind. And what Paul wrote, it is also based on his allegorical interpretation as well. So now this is one of the controversial lines that will be studied with a lot of textual analysis. So one of the lines said here, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." So later, as the story goes, the rib of Adam was taken out to form Eve, okay, which is the woman here. Now, when you read this line, how do you interpret the word helper? How do you interpret the word helper? Do you see that the word helper as conveying any inferiority or yes? Okay, yeah. So different people have different interpretation, because when I ask some Chinese students, they say, I don't feel so. Yeah, okay. So I think that is also cultural as well. Now, this line is according just to one translation in English, but there are a few translations in English. And yeah, so Esa is what in Hebrew should be pronounced. Esa in Hebrew actually mean helper or companion. So there are a few English translations that reads, I will make him a helpmeet for him. So this is King James Version. And then another version, I will make a companion for him who corresponds to him. This is New English translation. And then the next one, I will make a companion who will help him. That is according to New Living Translation. And then the last one, NIV, is the one that you don't like. The one that you don't like, that is, I will make a helper suitable for him. So actually, in the Hebrew language, that is the source text, it is very clear that helper should mean companion. Someone who corresponds to the other person. But when it comes to the different English translations, then different translations lead to different interpretations. So different people will have different preference for this line, I'm sure. Who would prefer the first one? Who would prefer the second one? Yeah, second one? Okay. Who would prefer the third one? Yes. Also yes. You prefer the third one, okay. It's quite equal. Yeah, so we've got a lot of votes for the second and the third one. And so some of you already shook your head when it comes to the last one. I will make a helper, okay? So it's a no, it seems. Well, yeah, so this is... So this line is particularly thought-provoking. Now, there is some other lines that are also quite controversial that ultimately shapes the women's role in church leadership. For example, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So in this line, actually, it shows not the kind of man first, woman second, but it shows that both of them are created in the image of God. It doesn't say, what is first, what is second. Now, in the second line, however, when Paul interpreted that, it becomes Adam was formed first, then Eve. Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. Okay. So when Paul had made this stamp, had made this conclusion, then in the end, a lot of churches, at least in our culture, the pastors or the church leaders quoted from Paul from time to time. Because you see, this is what Paul said. Okay, so according to Paul, then women should not be ordained or given a leadership role because of such. But if we listen to the feminist theologian, Philip Stribel. Now, interestingly, she is also quoted by some evangelical churches, Bible commentaries from Reformed tradition, because the way she interprets, because she knows Hebrew language very well. Okay, she's American, but on the other hand, she studies the origin, how this should be understood. So she actually tackled a number of points where women would be suppressed because of the previous lines. So she said that actually Adam was present when the serpent approached Eve. That is according to Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. Because in that line, the original translation should be when Eve took the fruit, Adam was with her. Okay, so it is not that Eve alone was being tempted. Actually, both of them bear the responsibility. And even more so, Adam, who saw the wife being tempted, said nothing, being the passive one. So who should be more responsible then? So you cannot simply put the blame on Eve without putting the blame on Adam. So this is how she tackled point by point. And then on the third point, she said it also very well. Now, in that story of the downfall, in that temptation story, there are three characters. We have Adam, Eve, but also the serpent. Okay, so among the three, actually, serpent was the first being cursed. Adam was not directly cursed, but then God say, "Cursed is the ground because of you," so that you will have to sweat to the brow in order to make a living. So that is according to Genesis chapter 3, verse 19. But Eve was not cursed among the three characters. What Eve suffered? Eve suffered that, according to God, it says, "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." But the word curse never appeared. So you can't say that, because Eve was the one solely being tempted, she was the weak one, and she should take on the full blame. If we read it very, very much in detail, you see that in verse 17, it shows the word cursed. Cursed is the ground because of you, that is Adam. And then by the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. For dust you are, to dust you will return. So as a result, actually, Adam has to work very hard. So that is the curse put on Adam. But it doesn't mention at all about any curse on Eve. Now, on the other hand, how should we also understand the word help? We still remember that in King James, it says, let man not be alone, but I will create a helpmeet for you. Okay, so because of the word help, then again, when this is translated into other languages, okay, some male church leaders also took advantage of the translation to try to suppress women even further. But how do we understand help? Help can also be understood as a form of protect, because in Psalm, not just in Psalm 33, but in other Bible verses, God also is the help. So is God inferior? Definitely not. But from a patriarchal structure, when the man who come from a patriarchal structure already read his own thinking into the scriptures, then that caused a lot of problem. So this particular line, okay, no problem. This particular line gives me a lot of food for thought. you can see when this is translated into Chinese, I give you all the back translation. So you have seen the different English translations already, NIV or RSV, for example. But now, as you compare the different Chinese versions, the same happened. So we have very clearly, I will make an assistant, okay? And then in another version, according to the Catholic version, also it says I will make him an assistant corresponding to him. And then in another old version, loose version, I will make a helper as the spouse. So whether it is helper or assistant, actually it very much communicate the inferior role that women should take. Now, another story that I want to tell you, which also is very interesting in inspiring me to write this paper. Back more than 15 years ago, when I started to join a church, after being baptized, I had the opportunity to attend a wedding. Okay, so in that wedding, we've got a male elder who was teaching, who is the one who teach the couple, the newlywed couple, how to behave in this newlywed relationship. So he particularly quoted this line, that is, I will make a helpmeet for you. So he spoke to the bride, okay, that he said, well, you see, the word help. Actually, woman has a role to assist man. And even when whatever he said, you should not criticize. And that's why I told my wife, in order to create a harmonious relationship, sound stupid. A woman should sound stupid. He is from a Brethren background. So the moment I listened to his sermon, I can only say that shivers sent down my spine. Really? And that was the beginning of awakening. Really? Did the Bible really say? Did the Bible really talk about inequality like this? And somehow, because that was the semester I started to study feminist theology, I had a term paper to write about a certain Bible verse. So that pushed me to read Phyllis Tribal and other feminist theologians and finally found out what helper should mean in Hebrew. That is totally not the same case. So at the same time, I also have some colleagues in the university that I've been working who is a Jew. So I asked the Jewish man, now, you being a Jew, how do you understand the Old Testament? So he also confirmed to me that actually Esa in Hebrew doesn't mean the assistant, but actually it means correspond against the person. So I felt relief. And there are a lot of cases that I would like to share, but because I have only a few minutes, I just have to be very quick, because what we have just seen is the translation of the Bible verses, but then other than the translation of the Bible verses that will lead to the suppression of women's role, there are also the paratexts in translation studies, which is the Bible commentaries, the annotations that can do the evil thing here. So it really depends on who write the Bible commentaries and annotations. So in my paper, I compared the different kinds of Bible commentaries. For example, this one is called the Devotional Bible for Women. And then there is another devotional Bible that is not particularly targeting women, but then I compared those biblical commentaries. And I found that this one, now, you see that this is really targeting the pink ladies. It's so pink, so prettily presented. So the target audience are the female Christians. Males are out of the question. But because it is edited and led, the whole project is edited and led by a female editor-in-chief. So she actually tried to pull together a lot of stories of female biblical characters and invited 1,000 short essays written by women. And in those biblical commentaries, she tried to highlight the importance of gender equality, also quoting from those verses that I mentioned, Genesis chapter 2, 18, and Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. So this Bible, devotional Bible, actually got a third prize for their editorial efforts. Compared with this one, which is Soul Care Bible, published by Worldwide Bible Society, this one is also a devotional Bible in nature. That is, you read the Bible, there are a lot of questions that you can reflect on. There are some other devotional verses. So the purpose is truly to be used in your quiet time for devotional purpose. But because this one is led by a man, I know that person as well, who is a counselor. He also relegated some of the tasks to a female deputy editor, whom I also know, whom I also interviewed. And during the process, I found that even though he had a female counterpart, but the decision-making is on him, the male person. So he invited different kinds of articles, not just written by women, but by men from all parts of, all over the world. And so because the purpose or scopus of this Bible is to provide spiritual guidance to Chinese Christians. So it's not just for women to read, but also for men to read. And when on some occasions, when they to give some Bible commentaries on those verses, Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, nothing about gender equality is highlighted, okay? But then there are some articles or some topics about how men should face the increasing female power in the society. So nothing about women's oppression is being mentioned. So this is, to me, so interesting. Now, there are also some other study Bibles, but I think because of time, perhaps this can be saved for your reading at home as a kind of homework. I mentioned earlier, Worldwide Bible Society. So in terms of comparing 3 study Bibles, Worldwide Bible Society is also one of those publishers. And then there is the China Graduate School of Theology, and the other one is Taiwan Bible Society, which is part of the United Bible Society. Okay, so, and I can say that for among these 3 study Bible versions, actually it is the Bible Society's version that is most accurate. It is not lengthy in the annotation, but it is spot on and unambiguous, relating to Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, for example, about the, and also on Genesis chapter 3, verse 8, where it is very clear in mentioning that Adam was present when Eve was being tempted. So they later updated the Chinese New Union Version to reflect that kind of change. So to conclude, so I think as I have shared quite a lot of stories with you, I also have some friends who later joined our university as an academic. But before that, she has been working as a church worker voluntarily for, I think, 7 or 8 years. But then why she did not continue with that role, which she have been serving for so many years right after graduating with a theology degree, like myself. So as a colleague, we chatted among ourselves about these things. So she has been working in a Reformed church in the UK year after year as a student worker, welcoming international students in the UK. So it's been doing very well. But then one time she was asked by the lead pastor to lead a church prayer. Okay, that's where the problem came. Because she's a woman, and that is a Reformed tradition church, which is very traditional. That is, women cannot take the leading role. So her presence of leading a prayer attracted complaints. So gradually she felt very hurt, very, very much rejected. I've been laboring, I'm not asking for money, but why still, after so many years, I cannot lead a prayer? So that is for you to think about. Is there a way forward? So that's the most important thing. I think in South America there are a lot of blessings on women seminarians, because they some of the modules are also being taught by feminist theologians, by female teachers. Okay, but then in our culture, even in Hong Kong, that is already quite open, most of the faculty members are still male. It's still a truly male-dominated environment, even within the church. So my conclusion is that on one hand, more seminaries should open up modules that touch on feminist theology, to revisit the Hebrew Bible, to be faithful to the translation at least, okay? Although still quite a lot of male church leaders stop their members from studying feminist theology. The word they used to describe feminist theology is dangerous. Don't go and study this module. This is dangerous, and you can't go back after you study feminist theology. So, we just pray and hope that this module can be open in more in more seminaries. And on the other hand, if it is in a non-Christian setting, feminist translation theories should be taught in universities. So again, in Latin America and in this university, you are very blessed to be able to be exposed to these theories. But definitely in our culture, this is being dismissed as, again, because some people will feel threatened because of that. Now, as a conclusion, if we are to quote from feminist translation scholar Floto, who pointed out that translators' positionality is undeniable, where the translator writes from a specific moment, from within a specific culture, and usually subculture, and often in dialogue with the social and political culture of the moment. And ideological change can only change slowly, okay? Especially when the patriarchal structure is so deeply rooted in certain societies. It can only change slowly, and it can be years until we see more gender-inclusive annotations and translated versions with more involvement of female editors and leaders. But this is not without hope, and we just have to keep going. So that's the end of my presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Janny, for your so inspiring talk. So we can talk later a little bit about it. So I would like to give the word to Anna.
Okay, you're welcome. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. Thank you, Érica, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here again. This is like my house, my home. Unicamp is my home too, the second home, because here I stayed for 4, 6, 8, almost 10 years. Yes, I love to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Well, I was listening to Jen speaking. I read 2 or 3 of her works, and I'm impressed how in Brazil in my reality, I'm from a background, religious background too, okay? And I have discussed and fight with the same problems that she arose here between us today, among us today. We have many problems related to the ordination of women in Brazil. We don't have women ministers, women in Brazil. And when they studied theology, they went to work as teachers of Bible in schools, okay? And they can't preach, they can take the place in public, and you know, it's a very similar reality here in Brazil. I have been in a seminar, theology seminar here from 60 kilometers from here, okay, where we have 19 teachers, male teachers, and only one female teacher in all the seminar of theology, okay? And this teacher, she's an archaeologist, a researcher, that she came from the United States. Sometimes they give permission to her to go and preach in a special moment, as it was in the Women's Day, okay? Women's Day on March 8th, she went to the pulpit and she talked a little bit like a lecturer, not a sermon, something like this. And then it's very similar. And for this reason, as with a religious background and studying here at Unicamp about a feminist translation, it was my first studies here, I have been taught about it for many years, and this behavior of our church, of the exclusion of women in the church, has brought me very, very uncomfortable moments, because I would like the things changed, and I have been called subversive in my church, in my space, okay, in my community, because I have taught my students that women were supposed to be educated to be leaders, as in the church, as in the world. And in translation, feminist translation, gender translation, I have taught my students to think about what they are reading and how the translations most of the times brings invisibility to the women in the Bible texts, mainly in the Bible texts. So today I will discuss a little bit about a verse in the Bible that has brought me many thoughts about the translation that I have seen. It's Ephesians 4:13. So I will explore the translational trajectory of the word manliness that I brought here. Wow, I will put it here, yes. Manliness that I put varonility or maturity. Perfect varonility coming from varão in Portuguese, okay? And the people that use this translation used to say that this is an inclusive translation. Perfect varonility, it's an inclusive translation. I don't think it's an inclusive translation, okay? And then this makes me to think a little bit, because in Ephesians 4:13, traditionally, it's rendered in some Portuguese versions as perfeita varonilidade, perfect manliness, perfect manhood, and translated into English in many modern versions as to mature manhood or simply maturity. Taking as a starting point the semantic field of the term varão, man, male figure of authority or virtue, and its latent root of fear. This text highlights the tension between historical gender language and contemporary inclusive translation practices. By comparing key biblical translations in Portuguese and English, the text examines how theological concepts of spiritual maturity, masculinity, and ecclesial identity have been shaped or softened through lexical choices. The discussion also considers the implication of translating anthropological and Christological dimensions of the text, especially in contexts aiming to uphold both faithfulness to ancient sources and sensitivity to inclusive language concerns. Ultimately, I intend to shed light on how a single term like varão encapsulates broader debates about gender, authority, and the evolution of biblical language across time and cultures, encompassing a more detailed look at the level of understanding and maturity those who translate have when creating translations that are respectful, accurate, and inclusive of diverse identities and perspectives. Then the question should be this: should we translate as originally written or as best understood today? This is a question about these texts. The idea that the discourse is never neutral and the language is always charged with ideological connotations provide a starting point which reflects on the use of language in the Bible translation process. Those who translate the Bible face real challenges, which have run the gamut from great joy to bitter hostility. Lawrence de Vries, 2011, points out that, quoting, translators never work in a pure and clean historical translation theoretical world in which they follow translation theoretical agendas. Rather, they serve commissioners and audience in specific times and places who want texts with which they can do things they want to do. Among other things, social and political factors determine the kinds of translators are expected to deliver. Unquoting. Contemporary approaches to Bible translation tend to be much more fully marked by awareness of problems of cultural bias or distortions and concerns about ideological issues and abuses in the past, and a commitment to translate the Bible in ways that do not promote injustice or alienation, or serve cultural agendas, especially the interests of the powerful at the expense of the powerless. Translators, like writers, readers, and speakers and listeners, have become more sensitive to ethnic, cultural, gender, and other types of bias, and try to avoid perpetuating them in their translations. All translation from one language to another necessarily involves multiple levels of interpretation. Furthermore, language is dynamic and evolves. Thus, it becomes necessary to revisit translations even within the same linguistic tradition. In the case of English Bible translation, for instance, it was both prudent and necessary to progress from Wycliffe, 14th century, to Tyndale, 16th century, then to the King James versions, 17th century, and later to American Standard Version and other significant 20th century and 21st century translations, according to Wright, 1992. A similar trajectory can be observed in the Bible translations in Brazil, where successive versions from João Almeida Ferreira initials translations in 17th century to more recent editions such as the Nova Versão Internacional, the Nova Almeida Atualizada, and the Nova Versão Transformadora reflect both linguistic developments in Portuguese and evolving theological, social, and cultural understandings. It's within this theoretical context of translation that the debate on inclusive language arises. When the Apostle Paul addresses believers in one of his congregations using the Greek term adelphoi, literally brothers, it's evident that both men and women were included in this designation. Yes, okay, it's evident that both men and women were included here. Translation adelphoi as brothers and sisters is therefore a theologically and ethically rounded translation choice, respecting both the historical social context of the original text and the demands of contemporary languages like English and Portuguese. The adoption of inclusive language, along with other modifications aimed at more accurate and faithful representation, naturally stems from the historical evolution and philosophical foundations of translation, according to Fioruza and De Vries. Thus, translations such as brothers and sisters instead of brothers and brethren, as in earlier versions of English Standard Version, the use of terms like person in place of man, and the substitution of singular masculine pronouns he with plural forms they and you should not be seen as concessions to secular agendas. Rather, these are legitimate attempts to offer translations that uphold both the historical authority of the biblical text and the need for meaningful communication in modern context. Such decisions align with the principles of dynamic equivalence as proposed by NIDA already in 1996 and reflect 1969, and reflect a commitment to responsible, contextual, and inclusive translation. Far from neutralizing or erasing gender identities, inclusive language seeks to make visible the presence of both people, be women or men, as subjects and agents within the biblical narrative. In the Almeida Atualizada, version 2017, some changes guided the translators, and they affirm, quoting, "Several times the term man has been replaced by people, human beings, and even humanity, whenever the reference is men and women. However, this does not mean that inclusive language has been adopted broadly and consistently, but rather that we have tried to be more precise and clear." This citation is the introduction of Bíblia Nova Almeida Atualizada from 2017. At the same way, the introduction to the NIV version supplies this rationale. It was recognized that it was often appropriate to mute the patriarchalism of the culture of the biblical writers through gender-inclusive language when this could be done without compromising the message of the Spirit. Preface to inclusive language of the version NIV in 1996. So, let's see here. I selected some Bible verses where the new versions has changed and they are trying to make the Bible more inclusive in their translations. So we can see there, here are the versions here, and here we can see progress through inclusion. Here the traditional translation, English and Portuguese. Here you have the versions beside, and here you can see where we read brothers, brethren. We can see now in this version brothers and sisters. But we can see in this, I could see in this research, in this list that I made, that it is not a consistent practice, because I have seen the NIV version, NVI version, a Nova Versão Internacional in Brazil, that in some points they are not inclusive. They continue to adopting the more the female language. And so it's not, you can see here, brothers and sisters in NIV in English. In the NASB, New American Bible, irmãos, brothers and sisters, and here, Bible, BLT, is Bible livre para todos. Only here I could see irmãos e irmãs. Then you see that's not a common practice yet, that is the same inclusiveness since the beginning of the Bible till the end of the Bible. No, we can see this more in the New Testament and not in the Old Testament of the Bible, okay? Fathers, pais, patriarchas, our fathers worshipped in this mountain, King James. Our fathers, English Standard Version, e na King James atualizada no Brasil. Nossos pais, na Nova Almeida atualizada, continua nossos pais, estão vendo? And then here we can see ancestors, antepassados. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, NIV version. My ancestors worshipped on this mountain. The Sev is a...
Nossos pais.
Yes. And os nossos antepassados, NIV, no Brasil. Então, here we can see nossos antepassados. A nova tradução na linguagem de hoje, New Translation in Today's Language. And a Bíblia livre, it's nossos ancestrais adoravam a Deus. Then you see that there is advances in this. Okay, we can see that we see advances, progress in this kind of translation. Paul sometimes, it's interesting here, sometimes changed to plural when quoting the Old Testament. Let's consider the following examples. Old Testament, here. Isaiah 52:7. How lovely on the mountains are the feet of him. And here, when Paul cites Romans 10:16, second part, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. Psalms 36:1, first part, there is no fear of God before his eyes. And here in Romans 3:10-18, there is no fear of God before their eyes. Blessed is he whose transgressions are forgiven. Here in Romans 4:6-7, blessed are they whose transgressions are forgiven. So let's see a little bit more about the verse, the citation that I started the text, that is Ephesians 3:14. 4:13. Here we see, until we all attain to mature manhood, translating varonilidade. Português ARA, Almeida Revista e Atualizada, of 1993. Perfeita varonilidade, strong gender connotation. Na King James Bible, from 1611, unto a perfect man. You see, traditional and gendered. I looked for in the Jerusalem Bible, from 2002, perfect or ideal human state. Almeida Revista e Corrigida, Mature. New Revised Standard Version, Maturity. You see here in this New Revised Standard Version in English that the language is inclusive and less literal. But in Portuguese, the same version, it maintains, it keeps varonility, man, perfect man. Dynamic equivalence, full spiritual maturity. Gender neutral, interpretive. So when we look at the origins, we see that Gibor, warrior, strong man, Greek, aner, adult, male, husband. The origin is male, is related to male, to man. Latin vir, man of strength and virtue, virility, varonility. And Portuguese, varão, from the dictionary, is idealized man figure. Yes, sorry, I was, okay. And here, there are other definitions from etymological dictionaries and from dictionaries in general, okay? But I will not discuss about it. But we see here in all these translations that are strong gender connotations in all the translations of varão in the Bible today. Why this matters? Why this matters? We can see that when the Bible uses, the translation uses this kind of excludent language, women feel less represented in the scriptures. Masculine language reinforces male-centered norms. Translations shape the liturgy, preaching, and theology, because what is not named is not remembered. What is not translated disappear, okay? And we see some criticism concerning to these movements of inclusive language in the translation that we have seen today. It's not coincidental that many of the most vocal critics of inclusive language are also those who oppose the full participation of women in church life, particularly regarding ordained ministry and leadership roles. Such resistance reveals a theological and ideological framework that, while professing spiritual equality between men and women, in practice perpetuates female exclusion based solely on gender. This instance reflects a deep-seated fear on gender equality, often rooted in the perception by some men that sharing power with women threatens their own position and authority within ecclesiastical structures. The conflictuous rhetoric emanating from non-conservative quarters has shown that the inclusive translation of the Bible touched a raw nerve. Deep-seated fears that cut across the theological spectrum has been exposed. Much more is at stake than the elimination of some pronouns and loss of some cherished appellation. Much more. The anxiety and the virulent clamor are caused, I think, by the recognition that this translation movement has put the theological foundation of the status quo under siege, and that traditional perception of God and of the power arrangements of men and women that are sanctioned and confirmed by those perceptions have been threatened. A quiet revolution is underway all around us, and Christians of all stripes are perplexed about what tactics to use to prevent its further advance. We have seen many attempts being made to discredit, defending that an inclusive language version of the Bible distort the scripture, serving as propaganda for a particular ideology, making room for all kinds of group interests that make changes in the Bible text to justify their points of view. However, this criticism is no way justifying this claim. Several people have made very helpful critics, and some translation committees hope that they will join by many others in their common task. I'm not defending any particular judgments had been made concerning the translation inclusiveness, but rather to talk about what I believe to be an absolute necessity for the church, namely the Christians hear the scriptures in language that includes them all equally. Some points of conclusion. As has been demonstrated by attending just to some translation choices in these limit tests, all these translations, like all others, reflect particular translation purpose and intend readerships, and those purpose and receptor communities are reflected in the translation choices made along the way. Most people who read the Bible are not adept of Hebrew or Greek, and so they will read the Bible in an English or in a Portuguese version. Of course, different versions may well be read primarily for their literary beautiful. Quite aside from the fact that it is a translation, the translation has its inherent value to facilitate the understanding of the Bible by both Christians and non-Christians. Translations as accurate as it is possible to make them must be provided. For such purpose, the American Standard Version and other significant 21st century translation in English, as well as the Almeida Bible Século XXI in Portuguese, are excellent tools. I'm convinced that the feminist movement represents a broad-based revolution in our culture, which is slowly gathering momentum from many quarters and whose tide will not be turned back. For they insist that women are the full equals of men and must be valued as men are in their personhood, represent nothing less than a cry for human equality and human justice. The canon belongs to the church, and although for most of the church histories the male portion of its membership has usurped the responsibility for translating and interpreting the canon, the time is long past due for the whole church, including its female members, to assert the right to its translation and interpretation. Patriarchal assumptions not only pervade the various writings of the Bible, but they have also controlled and determined both the form those writings take when rendered in another language and the way in which that render is to be interpreted. So the argument and the implications for an inclusive translation of the biblical text has indeed imposed a restriction stemming from this canon based on these patriarchal assumptions. But despite these constraints, these practices are a serious attempt to meet a deeply felt need in the Christian community. While many are open to continuing thought and discussion, inclusive language renderings of scripture are needed and are here to stay. This kind of translation is not the first attempt to render scripture in inclusive language, but as we could read in the quotation above from 1996, we can consider that others have been going on since the first translation of 1990. Nevertheless, the current initiatives have been the most striking and could not be ignored. So we can see that we are in a long way to construct, to impose inclusive language, not only in the Bible translation, but in all the tests that we face when we are working with translation as translators and readers. Okay? It's this. Okay. Oh, here are the references. Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna, for your inspiring talk also. So I would like to give the floor to Quéfren. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure. And after your presentations, and thank you for it, I don't think I have very much to say, but let's go. I'm here, so yeah. So my name is Quéfren. It's a name of a pyramid in a pharaoh. And I'm a biblical and translation researcher and teacher. And I work with the Bible Society of Brazil since 2011, working with Bible translation. And since 2022, as translation consultant with the United Bible Societies for Latin America and Caribbean projects. I was part of the committee that revised Almeida Revista Atualizada, Nova Almeida Atualizada. And it was an amazing, but also very frustrating work, especially in terms of gender. I must say that it's very hard to change traditional texts that the churches love and use, and even if the traditional translation is not very fair or very good or correct with women. Ezer Kinegdo, for example, that Janny mentioned, here in Brazil, in the more widely Bible translation, more widely used Bible translation is auxiliadora idônea, and it communicates inferiority. But God is also called Ezer for the people. So God is not just an auxiliador. He is a savior, he is protection, actually everything that Israel needs. So why women must be auxiliadora idônea, right? But now I'm not working with the revision right now. Now I have the privilege to work with different teams in multimodal Bible translation projects, including, as mentioned, translation for the Brazilian Sign Language with Brazilian deaf translators, Portuguese Sign Language with European deaf translators, and indigenous languages, immigrant languages. So I truly adore my work. I love to work with the Bible, and I really believe that translation is much more than a simple linguistic conversion. As you know, as students or researchers, for me, it is an ethical act that connects people to the diversity and richness of the biblical text. Well, so I prepared a short presentation for today, named Nara, Deconstructions of the Feminine in the Hebrew Bible and its Translations. And I'd like to share with you a bit of my doctoral research And maybe we can have time to discuss more about the aspects of our presentations. And I must to say, Janny, I really, really relate with you in many aspects of your experience. For example, my mom is also my hugest inspiration in my biblical research and in my work with translation. And in the other hand, you mentioned that having boys in the family is still better than having girls. And I remember in China, I remember with Brazilian Sign Language team, we are working now translating the book of Ruth. In the chapter 4, the women of the neighborhood say to Naomi, Ruth is more to you than 7 sons. So I remember, and I really believe we need to teach Ruth in our churches, in our communities, and to teach that women are blessings to the families. So thank you for everything you both said today. Well, when I began my studies, my initial goal was to understand how women and femininity are constructed in the text of the Hebrew Bible. My focus was on the images, figures, metaphors, and rhetorical strategies that relate to the feminine. However, as my research progressed, I began to notice a particular phenomenon. Rather than preserving these feminine constructions, many Bible translations erase the feminine or dilute or change the feminine, sometimes entirely. Unfortunately, especially Bible translations done with the dynamic equivalence methodology was not very nice with women in some texts of my research. One good example is the expression Bat Zion, daughter of Zion, filha de Sião, or daughter Zion. It depends on the translation. In some Portuguese Bible translations, Bat Zion is completely replaced with city of Jerusalem, people of Jerusalem, or simply Jerusalem. They change not only the term Zion, Zion, but also the feminine metaphor. And it's interesting because in Mesopotamian laments, parallel to the Hebrew Bible, goddesses were often associated with the daughters of the city they governed. So the biblical writers adapted this imagery and created a significant and very recurring expression, not of a goddess, but of a city personified as a daughter. This daughter weeps and suffers and laments and is violated, but also she smiles, dances, and is restored. So when the translations with this all substitutions made in translation, I realized that the readers miss the feminine, as you said, of the prophetic rhetoric. These realizations shifted the entire direction of my research. So the question then became not only how woman and femininity are constructed in the Hebrew Bible, but also why they are deconstructed in translation. What happens in that process? What choices are being made? And what do those choices reveal about the cultural and ideological frameworks that shape biblical translation? As a long-time reader of the Bible, I've noticed that in many faith communities, questioning Bible translation is not common. I don't know if you feel the same, but it's not very common. People often assume that what they are reading is a faithful, direct reflection of the original text, a pure and unfiltered message. Can you see the importance of a translation? However, translation is never neutral. It involves interpretation, decision-making, and negotiation. These choices shape how people understand the Bible, especially when it comes to gender. So, in the prophetic books, feminine figures are central to this emotional and spiritual rhetoric of the prophets. The young woman, Nara, for instance, in the prophets represents the city, the people, and the temple. She becomes a metaphor for suffering, violation, divine love, and restoration. So these poetic choices are not incidental. They are deliberate and carry deep theological and emotional power. So when translations remove or alter or change these metaphors, they effectively silence a vital part of the text's voice, and by extension, the feminine voice. But why does this happen? Why the translations choices is to erase the feminine from the prophetic rhetoric? Often the justification for simplifying or removing feminine imagery is clarity, especially in translations for indigenous languages or for sign languages used by deaf communities. So the metaphors are seen as difficult and are therefore often replaced or omitted in an attempt to help readers understand the biblical text better. However, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the cost of this clarity is very high. It can impoverish the text and contribute to the exclusion of women from the theological imagination, from the Bible. Actually, these decisions have real consequences. In my view, they can also affect how people see or do not see women in Scripture, and by extension, in the world. If the biblical woman is erased in translation, women readers may fail to see the powerful feminine experiences reflected in Scripture. And this deeply shapes how they perceive themselves and their spiritual value. The prophets explicitly denounce rape and violence against virgins in the texts, using these images as metaphors for the brutal enemy invasions of the cities and subjugation. All of Israel is called to identify with the feminine pain, and this is a powerful rhetorical move. But this is lost when the metaphors are erased, are dismantled. So if the Bible serves as a foundation for faith, for ethics, and culture, then these omissions aren't merely technical, they are systemic omissions. And we know that the Hebrew Bible is not a sealed text, hermetically sealed texts, but by its nature, it's always remained open to interpretation. However, through the history, the interpretive freedom so intrinsic to this Hebrew text has led to readings, understandings, and translations that have not always reflected the text's expressions when taking their original language and context. So these divergences have justified ideas and practices, especially against women, across different times, places, in the many languages into which the Bible has been translated. But as a cultural artifact of antiquity, the Hebrew Bible is filled with reference to the feminine. These include not only stories featuring female protagonists or legal prescriptions concerning women, but also, especially in poetry and prophetic books, metaphorical, analogical uses of the feminine names, such as the people's disobedience and the rupture of their covenant with God, are built upon intense and often negative female associated imagery. For example, infidelity, prostitution, rape, violence, mourning, abandonment, shame, humiliation, abomination, weeping, and suffering. Yet, within the same prophetic rhetoric, we also find positive portrayals reflecting divine love, hope for restoration, and a renewed covenant between God and the people. These include images such as the adorned bride, the restored virgin, the barren woman giving birth, the comforted young woman, and the beloved wife. This is a multi-layered and a very heterogeneous literature. And it's possible to identify feminine imagery and attributes not only as representations of punishment and suffering, but also as symbols of care, mercy, and love in the interplay between the divine and human relationship. These are like a pendular discourse that oscillate between oracles of destruction and prophecies of restoration. This is the way that the prophetic rhetorical was built. And this occurred over centuries of biblical textual production. It reflects a worldview closely aligned with the ancient Near Eastern thought. Understanding this perspective and these uses of the womanly image is very important and essential for a broader interpretation of the biblical texts. The expansion of Bible translations and the broader access to the scriptures brought with them a set of complexities, particularly regarding the role of women in Protestant communities. While translations indeed expanded women's participation in biblical reading and interpretation, dominant theological discourses concerning women have not progressed at the same pace. As such, the translated Bible, when read and interpreted in various cultural contexts, has often served. This reveals the ambiguous relationship between translations, empowering potential, and its simultaneous contribution to restrictive interpretations of the biblical text. The translation also can contribute to the erasure of the feminine by interpreting metaphors and adapting texts in a way that prioritizes clarity for the target audience. Often this results in the deconstruction of the feminine imagery. A good example of such erasure can be found in Isaiah chapter 37, verses 21 to 23. If you have a Bible app, maybe later you can check in your favorite Bible translation how the text is written. But I read in the Jerusalem Bible. It's a very literal translation, and the text says, "Then Isaiah, son of Amos, sent a message to Ezekiah. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, in response to the prayer you addressed to me concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria. This is the word that Yahweh has spoken against him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and mocks you. The daughter of Jerusalem tosses her head behind your back. Whom have you insulted and blasphemed? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your arrogant eyes? Against the Holy One of Israel." This translation closer mirrors the references found in the Hebrew. The virgin, Betullah, the daughter of Zion, Bat Zion, the daughter of Jerusalem, Bat Yerushalayim, appear in poetic parallelism, associating the feminine figures with the city, or the people of the city. And there is a dual reference here, both the city's purity, represented as a young virgin, desired by enemies, and its courageous, is his defiant attitude, mocking and rejecting the violence of the king. It's a very interesting and powerful metaphor. However, other translations render this passage quite differently. So I will mention the contemporary English version, CEV, and the translation is, "The people of Jerusalem hate and make fun of you. They laugh behind your back. Sennacherib, you cursed, shouted, and sneered at me, the holy God of Israel." So as we can see, the poetic and symbolic richness of the original is kind of lost, along with the feminine figures and the rhetorical function of the text. So I ask myself, what can we, as translators, as translation consultants, as Bible readers, what can we do when you see this kind of text? How can we think in translations in ways that honor the feminine voice and restore what has been lost? I'm not saying that we need to put women where women are not in the texts, but shed light in the text that was omitted, or this kind of translations. So here are some of the practical proposals that emerged from my research. This is very short, just to summarize to you. The first thing is trying to preserve complexity and ambiguity, especially in poetic and prophetic texts. I think the experience of reading a very hard text, a difficult text, is a very interesting exercise to do in communities, enrich the readings of the communities. Translating poetry as poetry is a good practice, prophecy as prophecy. This means maintaining literary devices such as rhythm, parallelism, repetition, and metaphor. Avoid oversimplification. Sometimes we want to understand the message behind the texts, and as translators, we tend to oversimplify the texts, trying to help the reader. But let the text's strangeness and difficult provoke reflection and discussion. As you know, in the Jewish tradition, as seen through the Midrash, this complexity of the texts is a feature, is like an invitation to read the text and to have an experience of discussion. So Bible translators really carry an ethical responsibility. By preserving feminine imagery, we not only respect the source texts, but also empower future generations, or our generations in our time, to read the Bible more justly, more inclusively, and more holistically. I think that's it, and maybe we can open to discussion. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Quéfren, so much for your talk. It's also inspiring. All the talks here are so important and intelligent and inspiring for us. So I would like to ask the audience if they want to ask questions and comments for our conferences here. Carlinhos não está funcionando, ó. Agora tá.
So I think there are two questions I would like to ask for all of you. Some thoughts also that I would like to share. If we think on the Bible itself, it is already a translation, right? Because it is the word of Jesus written by other people. I don't know, I'm kind of... Yes. But is it already a translated text? Is my first question. If it is already a translated text, can it be ever translated as originally written? Is it possible to escape culture? As listening to you, I don't think it is as in any text that is translated. Another question is more curiosity, maybe. Is there any discussion on translating the Bible considering non-binary language? Because inclusive language and feminist translation studies are also concerned with this aspect, especially considering that in Brazil, conservative, anti-trans parties and people in general usually have a strong Christian background, and most importantly, also there are trans and non-binary people that are Christian. So I would like to know if there is any discussion on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Here. Okay. Okay, is there any other... maybe we should go in blocks, because we have to start another session at 15 minutes. Okay, is there any other question so we can hear? Okay.
Hi, I am a student here at Unicamp, and I have a question for all of you. I would like to know more about how do you deal with the backlash of being of bringing a feminist translation to the Bible, because I've heard of people that have such proposals that they are not considered Christians enough, or not real Christians, or just people that are trying to dismantle the church and some such things as that. So I would like to hear more about all of your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other question, comments? Você quer que eu traduza?
É que a minha pergunta é para ela, eu não sei.
Melhor. Bom, mas ela tem que ouvir. Sim.
Tá.
Eu posso falar inglês.
Então, pronto.
Hi.
Bom.
My question is a little bit specific about the Portuguese translation of the Bible. As a writer, I'm not a translator yet, but I have a question because I have been reading and there's a lot of parts. Then I feel like the word joy, like joy or happiness, is translated as gozo. That is really sexual. I feel like it has a sexual. I don't know.
Nowadays.
Yeah, it's weird to me because doesn't seem like is this, you know? So it feels a little bit fálico. Como eu posso falar isso? So yeah, so it's a little bit weird. So it's strange to see this, you know. I've been raised as in a church, so it was common to me. But now I'm studying translation, and I start questioning myself, like, is it okay? So I find other translations that don't use the same type of words. So that's my question.
I don't think it's a question for all of them. I think maybe even if it's about Portuguese, is that there any other comments? I would like to make a comment, just a comment, and see whatever you want to talk about. I know I'm talking to translators, so I'm talking to people who deal with written language, right? So I would like to hear about the talks, about the interpretation, the oral interpretation done by the pastors and church and priests and sisters, because in Brazil, most of the interpretation of the Bible is heard. It's not really read, but it's heard by lots of people, millions of people, thousands of people are, in Brazil, hearing interpretations about the Bible. And I would like to cite one of them, which is Camila Barros. It's a woman. And she's, there's a student of mine who is interested in this woman. And she gave a sermon talking about one of her sermons. She's very famous. And she talks to women. And she sells Bibles to women. Do you know her? She's very young. She's 43. And not so young anyway. But then she makes some interpretations about how women should act. And she's doing some interpretations about women being, I don't know the pronunciation, the good pronunciation of this, entrepreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs, right? Right? Yes, entrepreneurs. She's doing, when women say there are women in the Bible saying that women are working and they are leading, and now she is modernizing this interpretation of the Bible. And that's what I was going to, just telling this to you about this very, very multimodal interpretation of the Bible, right? Not just from written text to another written text, but from written texts to oral texts, right? Not just oral, but multimodal. Thank you. So any other comments? Because now I think we have 4 comments, so they can, okay? So I'm going to start with Janny. Thank you, Janny.
Hello.
It's not working. I mean, Carlinhos, acho que não.
Hello? Yeah. Well, I think I can answer the question about how to deal with the backlash of feminist translation. Because that applies across the board. So I think the examples I show, or with the paper that I wrote, you can see that in the title, I actually did not highlight this is about feminist translation or interpretation of the Bible. And when I interviewed some of the translators of Bible societies who now updated the Bible translations on Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, or Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, they said they are just trying to restore the original understanding, the original meaning of the Hebrew language. For example, Genesis 3, verse 6, it has been updated across different Chinese translations, and then the editor simply said, "We are not here being affected by any kind of ideologies or out of marketability. It's nothing like that. It's just to bring about the original flavor." Okay, so I would say that in our culture, I won't say feminist translation is gaining ground in the church circle, because I don't even want to mention the word feminist translation in the first place. But then it's just important that editors or those in the editorial board, they pay more attention in the originality, in the fidelity, in the accuracy, so that certain words, certain phrases are being restored. For example, Adam is present while the fruit was taken, or the word help. Some other commentaries can be added in order to explain the word help. So is this called feminist translation? It's actually about faithful translation, more about feminist translation. So in our culture, we deal with it in a very tactful way. And when I interviewed those who are of Bible societies, they say after there are new translations, before they launch to the market, they engage with focus groups in order to test how people feel it. And then there'll be discussions, and finally, the new translation is being launched. So it's not overnight process, because things can only change very slowly. And as one of our speakers say, people of older generations, they do have their favorite version. They have been so accustomed to those so-called canonized versions that any new translations will obviously be seen as heretical in the end. Whether you see that as feminist translation or not feminist translation, any new translation will be seen as totally toppling the tradition. So with Bible Society, that is the first in producing the Chinese Union version. Then there are newer Bible societies who retranslate and then being attacked by the church circle. So yeah, it's not just about feminist translation or feminist translators having to deal with the backlash. Any translators that try to update the version will also suffer from a lot of setbacks as well. Yeah. So I hope I answered a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with your last part and others, of course, but I like to remember the Canadian translators, feminist Canadian translators, when in the 60s in the year decade of 60, 70, they started a movement of translating, and their main mode, it was give visibility to the women. And I will do everything I can to make the women visible. So I think this movements of feminist translation, many people has bias. There are many bias, preconcepts against the feminist translation, but the way these ladies started to fight for their rights hit us positively, okay? Because from their discussions, we in Brazil, as researchers, we started to research too and see what is happening with the Bible translation. What is happening with literature translation, Bible as literature too. And then we start to think about and how to deconstruct this kind of patriarchalist translation that we are used to read, and sometimes we don't discuss it. And then I think this problem, this preconcepts that we see against feminist translation, I can see in the church it's huge, okay? It's wide, and we cannot talk about it in a religious environment. I'm referring to my religious background. It's evangelical, okay? But I insist that we need to research and continuing thinking to give more voice to the women from the Bible, in the Bible, and to the church. Because still today we live in a modern world, okay? But yet the women continuing being discarded, excluded in the churches where I used to attend. And then I think it's important. It's a research that we need to continue, okay? And about the word gozo, who asked for the word gozo, the translation of gozo, yes. You know that today we have the manuals of politically correct translation. And the joy, the word joy in English, it's advised to be translated as alegria, felicidade, contentamento, and never as gozo. Because gozo nowadays has a sexual connotation. You are right. And then in books, and all books that we have translated, I translate to a editor press, and then I take the care. I'm careful about this kind of words that I know are politically incorrect to say today. And then today we don't use anymore. Even the music where we have the gozo, we have a music in my church. Eu tenho gozo, gozo in my heart. I have joy, joy, joy. And then it was translated here in Brazil in the 60s, 70s decades as I have gozo, gozo in meu coração. Today, no. Today we sing, I have alegria. We changed a little bit the rhythm, the compass of the music, but we don't use this word anymore in my church because of this connotation. It's very interesting what you said, okay? And I think today we need to modernize the Bible translation. I defend the modernization of the Bible. Even it is with a feminist base or another way of thinking. It's important to modernize the Bible, the translation of the Bible. Because I think when you modernize a book translation, you are giving space and voice not only to the women, but all the people involved in the discourse. Okay? I think it's this. Thank you.
So many good questions, and I don't think we have all the answers, but maybe I can say about non-binary translations. Maybe we can think in non-binary hermeneutics or readings of the Bible, because I don't think there is a feminist Bible translation, but a feminist hermeneutic. So a parallel for you maybe to understand better. I work with the deaf community. So sometimes we are translating texts that says, God is hearing our praying. So the deaf, they feel very uncomfortable. But we are deaf. We are not saying a praying. We are using our hands. So can we translate God is seeing our praying? I think it's a way to translate, but maybe we can try to balance the source text in our translation. Sometimes they use the both. They use God maybe is hearing and seeing our praying. So they use a composition, trying to not be unfaithful with the text, but maybe incorporating the deaf way to translate or to pray. But it's hard. It's a very sensitive question. Can we do this kind of interference in the texts? I don't know. But maybe you defend the modernization of the Bible. It's perfect, but yes, it's sensitive. It's not easy to do.
The Bible is a sensitive text.
It's hard. About the question about the word gozo, joy, alegria, it's interesting because, for example, in the Bible Society, I think until 1993, 1 Corinthians said the word not love, but the word caridade. And now it's very weird to think that caridade is the same thing that love. You love me, or you have caridade or charity. I don't know in English. Charity was the word used in 1 Corinthians 13 as love in Portuguese traditional translation. So many readers wrote to Bible Society, please change it. The text is very weird to read in our churches, that the charity is patient, please change the word. And the Bible Society changed the text because language is not is a living thing. And in the United Bible Societies, we think that the ideal scenario is to revise a biblical text, a Bible translation, each 25 years. And I think it's not a very easy thing, but is the ideal world, maybe 20 years, each 20 years, because the language changes. So gozo, for instance, I think when Almeida, for example, is a translation from 17th century. So Almeida published the text in 1689. And until now, we use Almeida's text as our main Bible translation. But Almeida needs to be revised. Because if it's not, we have this case. Gozo, it's super weird. But it's a word in Portuguese. It's and meaning, one of the meanings, maybe it's not the first meaning now we think it's alegria. So it's not a wrong translation, but maybe we can revise. There is so many cases. For example, about the last thing I will say, Phoebe in the New Testament. Phoebe is portrayed as diakonos of the Church of Syncreia. I don't know how to say in English, but she is a leader in the church. But all the men called diakonos in the New Testament are diáconos in Portuguese. Only Phoebe, a woman, is servant, a serva da Igreja de Syncreia. And why this difference? Why the men are diáconos, very polite, I think, very beautiful thing, and the woman is servant. So yes, we need to change our mind and start to look to the translation and thinking faithful translations. I don't think it's a matter of a feminist translation, but maybe a feminist perspective or a way to read the text. And the non-binary is the same thing. I understand that is an important issue today, and maybe we can have, I don't know, people researching the Bible, studying the Bible, and publishing good books or good studies with this hermeneutic. So that's it, I think.
Are there any more comments or questions? So I would like to thank you to Janny, Anna, and Quéfren. Thank you so much. And Érica is going to give some a final word, but
just So we have coffee now, and we can come back at 4:45. Okay. So thank you again for everybody. Thank you for the inspiring talks, and thank you, Carlinhos and Carlão, for the support. So see you soon.